Today, I want to talk to the woman who's been faithfully praying, going to Mass, doing everything she knows how to do, but still feels stuck, still feels anxious, still feels like something's not healing, no matter how much she tries to offer it up. This isn't because you're not praying hard enough. It's not because you're a bad Catholic. It's because sometimes, without realizing it, we use our faith as a shield to protect ourselves from emotions that feel too painful to face. This is called spiritual bypassing. And today we're going to talk about what it is, why it happens, and how to gently break free without abandoning your faith.
Welcome to the Catholic Couch, the official podcast of the Catholic Counseling Institute, where we integrate the wisdom of our Catholic faith with modern psychology and give you real tools for real life. I'm Amber Pilkington, Catholic therapist, wife, mom, and woman who used to think if I could just pray a little harder, I'd never have to feel my feelings. Today, we're going to have a conversation that might be tender for some of you. I want you to know right now, this isn't going to be a video where I tell you that you're doing faith wrong. I love your faith. I love mine. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. But sometimes, without realizing it, we can end up using the very practices that are meant to heal us as a shield. Something to hide behind so we don't have to feel pain, face hard emotions, or sit in the discomfort of being human. Like, this isn't because we're bad Catholics. It's not because we're trying to lie to ourselves or to God. It's just that we don't know another way. Somewhere along the way, we've picked up this quiet belief that being a good Catholic means always being peaceful, always being joyful, always being composed. And when life doesn't feel that way, when we're grieving or angry or anxious, we think the answer must be to pray harder, serve more, or offer it up until it goes away. And sometimes it does, but other times the pain lingers, the anxiety doesn't lift, the wound stays raw. That's when we might be caught in something called spiritual bypassing. Now, if that term makes you cringe or feel defensive, please stay with me. Spiritual bypassing isn't a sin. It's not a moral failing. It's a human reflex. It's a way we try to protect ourselves from emotions that feel too big, too messy, or too scary to face head on. And sometimes we're not even aware we're doing it. Today, I want to gently walk with you through what spiritual bypassing is, why it shows up in faithful Catholics, and how becoming aware of it can actually deepen your relationship with God, not threaten it. Because here's the truth. God doesn't need you to be emotionally perfect to love you. He doesn't want a performance. He wants you, your whole heart, including the parts that are hurting, angry, anxious, or confused. So let's take a deep breath together. This isn't going to be a lecture. This is a conversation, a space to reflect, to notice, and to begin to understand ourselves in a new way so we can walk the path of healing with Christ, fully and honestly. So what exactly is spiritual bypassing? Let's keep it simple. Spiritual bypassing happens when we use spiritual ideas or practices to avoid dealing with difficult emotions, unresolved wounds, or psychological struggles. It's when we unknowingly use our faith as a way to escape from the very human experience of feeling things like grief, anger, anxiety, or even confusion. This is different from spiritual resourcing, where we use prayer to support our psychological processing. It's not that prayer, scripture, or sacraments are the problem. They are powerful, life-giving gifts. But sometimes we can use them like a Band-Aid on a wound that really needs stitches. Let me give you a few examples. And as I share these, I want you to listen with curiosity, not shame. If you recognize yourself, you're not alone. I've been there too. Maybe you're feeling anxious about a decision, but instead of sitting with that discomfort and asking where it's coming from, you tell yourself, I just need to pray more and trust God. But the anxiety doesn't go away. It just simmers under the surface. Or perhaps you're grieving a loss, but you keep reminding yourself to be joyful in all things, so you don't give yourself permission to cry, to mourn, to feel that ache in your chest. You move forward, but something feels stuck. Maybe you're angry, really angry, about an injustice, but you believe that anger isn't holy. So you suppress it, you spiritualize it, you tell yourself that saints don't get angry, but it builds up and it leaks out in other places. These are moments where spiritual bypassing can quietly take root. It's important to understand we don't do this because we're being dishonest or because we're trying to deceive ourselves or God. We do it because it feels safer, because facing the rawness of our emotional pain is scary. Because somewhere along the line, we might have been taught that strong faith looks like emotional control, that holiness means being above the messiness of human feelings. But scripture tells us otherwise. In the Psalms, we see David pouring out his rage, his despair, his confusion, and his fear. He doesn't hide those feelings from God. He brings them right into his prayers. Jesus himself, in the Garden of Gethsemane, didn't bypass his agony. He felt it fully. He wept. He sweat blood. He cried out to the Father. True holiness isn't about escaping our emotions. It's about bringing them honestly and fully into relationship with God. But faith that doesn't include our emotional reality becomes a hollow shell. It looks right on the outside, but inside there's a disconnection. That's why today we're going to keep exploring this gently, not to condemn, but to become aware. Because awareness is the first step to freedom. Now that we understand what spiritual bypassing is, let's talk about why we fall into this trap, especially as faithful Catholics who truly desire to do what's right. The reasons are deeply human. They're not signs of weak faith. They're signs of being human in a world that often doesn't teach us how to feel safely. 1. Fear of pain. One of the biggest reasons we bypass is simple. Emotional pain is scary. We instinctively avoid what hurts. When grief, anger, anxiety, or shame start to rise, it feels overwhelming. We wonder, if I let this in, will it swallow me? So, without realizing it, we reach for what feels safe. We pray harder. We cling to spiritual phrases like let go and let God. And while those phrases can be beautiful truths, if we use them to avoid facing what's actually happening inside, they become shields that protect us from our own hearts. It's not about being dishonest. It's about being scared. Scared that if we feel too much, it will be too much. But God is not afraid of our pain. He doesn't need us to be emotionally numb to be holy. He wants to meet us in that pain. 2. Cultural pressure to be holy. There's also a cultural layer to this. Whether anyone ever said it to us directly or not, many of us have absorbed the belief that good Catholics are always composed, always peaceful, always joyful. We think of saints as people who radiated constant serenity, and when we don't feel that way, we assume the problem must be us. But that's not the full picture of holiness. Saint Teresa of Avila once told God, "If this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few." Saint Monica wept for her son's conversion. Even Jesus overturned tables in righteous anger. Holiness is not about suppressing emotions. It's about responding to them with wisdom, truth, and grace. Yet in many faith communities, there's an unspoken expectation to keep it together. And when we don't, we feel like we're failing spiritually. So we bypass, not because we want to be fake, but because we're trying to live up to an ideal we were never meant to carry. 3. The quick fix mentality. Another reason is this: we long for peace. We want healing. We crave relief. And sometimes we're tempted to look for shortcuts. It's human nature. If I can just pray this novena, go to adoration, offer it up, surely the suffering will lift. And sometimes it does. Miracles happen. But most of the time, healing, especially emotional healing, is a process. It's not a quick fix. It's a journey of self-awareness, acceptance, and integration. When we expect faith to be a magic eraser for our emotional pain, we set ourselves up for frustration. And when the pain doesn't go away, we either assume we're not praying hard enough, or worse, that God is distant. Neither of those things are true. God is not a vending machine. Prayer is not a transaction, and healing is rarely instantaneous. But in the discomfort, in the wrestling, he is present. 4. Early conditioning around emotions. For many of us, spiritual bypassing starts long before we even know the term. From childhood, we might have been taught that certain emotions are bad or unacceptable. Maybe anger wasn't safe to express. Maybe crying was seen as weakness. Maybe vulnerability felt like a luxury you couldn't afford. So when we find faith, we apply those same emotional rules to our spiritual life. We think that feeling those bad emotions must be a sign of spiritual immaturity. but it's not. It's a sign of being human. Healing comes when we realize that God doesn't ask us to stop feeling. He invites us to feel with Him. You might be wondering, is this just a personal thing or is there real research on this? The truth is, spiritual bypassing has been studied by psychologists and pastoral counselors for years, but it's still a quiet topic, especially in Catholic spaces. That's why I want to walk you through some of these studies in a way that's easy to understand. Not because research gives us all the answers, but because it helps us see we're not alone. These are patterns. They're human, and they're more common than you think. Study 1, Picciotto, Fox and Nato, 2017. Listening to real people's stories. Researchers interviewed people who experienced spiritual bypassing and asked them to share what it was like. Here's what they found. Most of the people weren't trying to avoid healing. They simply didn't know how to feel their emotions safely. They used spiritual practices as a way to cope with emotional wounds they weren't ready to face. Over time, though, bypassing led to feeling stuck, isolated, emotionally disconnected. They couldn't understand why their spiritual life felt hollow, even though they were doing everything right. This study showed that bypassing isn't about bad intentions. It's about fear, lack of tools, and environments that don't encourage emotional honesty. Study 2, Fox et al., 2017. Measuring spiritual bypassing, SBS-13 scale. Another group of researchers created a tool called the Spiritual Bypass Scale 13. They used it to see how spiritual bypassing impacts people's mental and emotional health. Here's what they discovered. People who scored higher in spiritual bypassing also reported higher levels of anxiety, depression, and emotional distress. They were less likely to be mindful of their emotions in daily life. In simple terms, the more someone used spiritual ideas to avoid emotional pain, the more that pain built up beneath the surface. But here's the key insight. This wasn't about people lacking faith. These were people deeply committed to their spirituality. The problem wasn't their love for God. The problem was the belief that faith alone, without emotional integration, would erase human pain. Study 3, Moutinho et al., 2021. Cultural differences. And this study compared spiritual bypassing in different cultural settings. For example, in places where religious practice is deeply woven into daily life, like Honduras, bypassing was more common. Why? Not because people were less faithful, but because emotional expression wasn't encouraged in those environments. There was an unspoken rule to keep emotions private, to keep faith public, and never to mix the two. What does this mean for us as Catholics? It means that spiritual bypassing isn't a personal flaw. Often, it's something we absorb from our culture, our communities, even our church environments. Well-meaning people trying their best, but never taught how to hold their emotions and their faith together. Study 4, Thomas, 2023. Church hurt and bypass. Another study looked at people who experience hurt within the church, whether through leadership, community dynamics, or rigid expectations. Often these individuals coped by doubling down on spiritual practices as a way to avoid facing the emotional wounds of that hurt. Think of it like this. If a part of church life hurts you, it can feel safer to stay on the surface. Keep going to Mass, keep serving, keep performing the right actions because facing the pain feels too risky. But that pain doesn't go away just because we bury it. Study 5, Reed Gilbert, 2023, The Pressure to Perform Spiritually. This study focused on women in church communities who felt they had to perform spiritually. They had to look like they had it all together. That pressure often led them to suppress their real emotional struggles because vulnerability wasn't seen as strength. Sound familiar? Many of us, especially women, feel this tension. We're expected to be the strong, joyful, faithful anchor for everyone else. So we tuck away our own emotional needs in the name of virtue. But here's the truth. Authentic virtue requires emotional honesty. Catholic Reflections, Souls and Hearts, and Catholic 365. Even within Catholic ministries, there's a growing awareness of this issue. Catholic therapists and spiritual directors are beginning to name spiritual bypassing as a human formation wound. It's not a theological problem, it's a human development challenge. In Catholic teaching, formation isn't just spiritual, it's human, emotional, relational. When those areas are underdeveloped, we can fall into the habit of using spiritual practices as a mask for deeper wounds. So where do we go from here? If you're starting to see places in your life where spiritual bypassing has shown up, I want you to hear me say this. You're not failing at faith. You're human. Spiritual bypassing isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to become aware of, because once you see it, you can begin to heal it. You can bring it into the light and invite Christ into those hidden places, not to fix you instantly, but to walk with you in a deeper, more authentic journey of healing. Let's talk about how. 1. Mindful self-compassion, meeting yourself as Christ does. One of the first steps is learning to meet your emotions with the same compassion Christ has for you. Instead of pushing away a difficult feeling, pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? Where do I feel this in my body? Can I allow myself to be with this feeling just for a moment, knowing Christ is with me in it? This is not about wallowing in emotions. It's about creating a space where they can exist without fear or judgment. As St. Francis de Sales said, be patient with everyone, but above all, with yourself. Mindful self-compassion allows you to stay present to your inner experience, knowing you are safe, you are loved, and you don't have to fix it all at once. Second, somatic awareness, listening to the body. Our bodies often hold the emotions our minds try to avoid. When we bypass emotionally, the body speaks up through tension, fatigue, anxiety, even physical pain. A simple practice you can try is this. Sit quietly and notice where you feel tension. Place your hand there and breathe gently. Without needing to analyze, simply acknowledge, this part of me is holding something important. Somatic awareness is not New Age. It's profoundly incarnational. As Catholics, we believe in the dignity of the body. God meets us in our physical selves, not just our minds or souls. 3, emotional honesty in prayer. The Psalms are a masterclass in emotionally honest prayer. David didn't sanitize his feelings before bringing them to God. He raged, wept, questioned, and pleaded. Give yourself permission to do the same. Your prayer doesn't have to be polite. It has to be real. You can sit in adoration and say, Lord, I'm angry and I don't know what to do with it. You can whisper, Jesus, I feel anxious and I need you to just sit with me in this. This is the heart of relational prayer, bringing your whole self to the one who already knows you fully. 4, reframing spiritual maturity, integration over perfection. Spiritual maturity isn't about never feeling pain. It's about learning to feel it fully and respond with wisdom, grace, and resilience. Saints are not people who never struggled emotionally. They are people who allowed God to meet them in their struggle. The Catechism teaches us that grace builds on nature. CCC 2008. That means God's grace doesn't erase your human emotions. It works through them, transforms them, sanctifies them. Maturity is not found in bypassing discomfort. It's found in integrating all parts of ourselves, light and shadow, into the journey of holiness. 5, safe spaces and support. Lastly, you don't have to do this work alone. Seek out emotionally safe spaces where you can be honest. This might be a Catholic therapist, a trusted spiritual director, or a small group that values authenticity over appearance. Healing happens in relationship. If you've been in environments where emotional honesty was discouraged, I want you to know that wasn't the fullness of what the church teaches about human dignity. You are not a problem to be fixed. You are a person to be loved. And God is deeply interested in your wholeness, not just your surface virtue. So here's my invitation to you. I want you to take a moment after this video, maybe when you're washing dishes, driving to school pickup, or sitting in adoration, and gently ask yourself, Are there places in my life where I'm using faith as a way to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions? Have I ever told myself to pray it away when what I really needed was to bring it to prayer in its raw, messy form? Where might God be inviting me to slow down, to feel more deeply, to sit with the uncomfortable instead of rushing past it? I know these questions can feel vulnerable, but vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is where real transformation begins. The bravest spiritual act isn't to avoid the darkness. It's to walk through it with Christ by your side, illuminating every hidden corner, not with condemnation, but with healing love. I'm not asking you to fix yourself. I'm asking you to notice, to become aware, to invite Christ not just into the beautiful, peaceful parts of your life, but into the tangled, aching, restless parts too, because that's where he does his best work. I want you to remember, spiritual bypassing doesn't mean you're doing faith wrong. It means you're human. It means you're longing for peace. And the good news, you don't have to choose between emotional honesty and spiritual devotion. The path of sainthood is one of integration, not avoidance. Christ is not afraid of your mess. He's already entered it through the incarnation. He is Emmanuel, God with us, in the joy, in the sorrow, in the struggle. So today, let's choose to let him meet us there. If you found this reflection helpful, I want to offer you a free guide, 5 journal prompts to break free from spiritual bypass. These prompts are designed to help you gently explore where bypassing might be showing up in your life and how to bring those areas into deeper conversation with God. There is a link in the description. Remember, I'll always leave a place for you on the Catholic couch.